Why? 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 Wait, okay, they listened to my advice. That one's excused. But why, though? Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. Today, we have 10 duties as warrior once again, with today's theme being, wow, that's a lot of white mages. This time around, we are also back in 4-man content only, and in my opinion, it did not feel like a lot of variety, even though we did have some variety in the duties. With that said, for duty 1, we have Shisui of the Violet Tides, which went very well. In particular, the big AoE pull before the second boss went very nicely here, as you can see, with no major concerns. And on the second boss, the machinist messed up dealing with the seduce mechanic, and then the healer pulls out this rescue trick to save them. The entire run went very nicely. Also, did you know that warrior can solo Shisui of the Violet Tides synced, including the giga pull before the second boss? Kiting is amazing, I tell you. For duty 2, we went to Alzadaal's Legacy, and it seems like the Black Mage might have been a first-timer. Despite this, overall I think they did decently well. On the second boss especially, I did assist them quite frequently with Nascent Flash. There's just something foreboding about when you don't quite know if you are in a safe spot or not, and then the tank puts their defensive cooldown on you. Alright, probably not a safe spot then. The Samurai also played quite well. Now, the healer then. There's a lot here. At least they didn't use Cure 1, but they were very happy to use Cure 2 quite frequently. Furthermore, they did not seem to use Eyes much if at all in the entire dungeon, among other things. However, I had a feeling something like this would happen almost immediately when I noticed that the healer used Holy like once or twice per pull, but otherwise just used Glare. The classic mistake of assuming Holy is used for the stun and not for the damage. I mean, there's a fair argument that you use it for both, but certainly spamming Holy is for the damage. This did not improve throughout the duty unfortunately, and I did try to tell them to Holy more. But given I got 0 response from them, I assumed they were not listening, so I did not push further. My best guess is that they were not very experienced with White Mage. I know that sounds wild at level 90, but you can absolutely reach level 90 with a job without learning that much about it. I noticed they were not very fast on reactions when things happened, which meant things went more wrong than they needed to. Slower reactions like this could be explained by a less experienced player. Now, despite all this, the duty of course went okay, albeit a bit slow. Also, did you know that warrior can solo Alzadaal's Legacy synced? It's actually very easy. For duty 3, we land in Shisui of the Violet Tides again. At first, when I noticed the healer was spamming stone, I started to worry that I had a Holy is for stun White Mage twice in a row, but then I realized they were focusing on the specific mob that needs to die to cause the extra wave of mobs to come running, which meant it was actually smart. Aside from that, I guess at certain points they could maybe have gotten away with not using regen, but I feel that's extremely minor. Better to have that slight extra bit of safety anyway. I'm guessing the ninja was a first timer given how much they got trounced by the seduce mechanic and almost died to the chasing fire AoEs, but this time we had a healer with the reflexes to help with that. Overall, a very clean run, and also very fast. For duty 4, I was a 6-minute replacement in Castrum Meridianum. I am a bit shocked that no one even tried to pull while waiting for a tank, honestly. It's just Castrum after all. And again, the healer was making a lot of weird mistakes. Holy was used rarely, probably just for the stun, even on a single target at times. They also used Cure 1 extremely frequently. What exactly they chose to do at any given time I could only explain with either they always top up everyone all the time, or they randomly choose to do a thing. I know it is just Castrum, but still. In fairness, the Black Mage could have dodged a bit better, but aside from that, both the Ninja and Black Mage were doing fine. I felt it was weird to try and approach the healer mistakes in Castrum given it wasn't causing us any big trouble after all, but I also saw there would be a big language barrier. Now, I think this might be a decent time to talk about this subject, because often when I bring up the concept of not healing more than is necessary and focusing more on attacking, it is not uncommon I get responses like, "But in my groups, I have to heal this much." This may be true for some, and sometimes you get some strange groups. But I also want to say that when things like unnecessary Cure 1s or overly frequent Cure 2s are cast, or the healer just stands there doing nothing, it can sometimes feel demotivating and deflating for the rest of the group. At best, such a healer is being overly cautious, and at worst, they're outright sandbagging it, potentially out of laziness. By not attacking, fights go on longer than usual, which can lead to the tank running out of or low on cooldowns. If it drags on for way too long, DPS will also run out of damage cooldowns, which exponentially lengthens the fight. Both of these things cause the group as a whole to take more damage, requiring more healing as a result of not attacking. This does not exactly inspire the rest of the group either, and can cause the tank, or sometimes even the DPS, to simply not try as hard, since the healer isn't trying much either. If the healer is only really acting when healing is needed, why should the tank try so hard to manage their cooldowns, right? Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is not, you must attack at all times as a healer. Rather, doing nothing is bad, and spamming heals that weren't needed at all is wasteful. Find out how much healing is needed and try to provide that healing. If you aren't sure, of course, play it a bit more carefully. I have a video on the subject of mistakes healers make for more on these kinds of things. For Duty 5, we went to Malikah's well, and it turns out the Reaper knew me. Hello! Anyway, right at the start, the Astrologian was spamming heals, including Benefic 1, so I stopped and asked if I could give them some advice. As they said yes, I first told them to not use Benefic 1 if anything else is available. Then added that they should heal when healing is needed and instead spend that time attacking. This immediately improved the pace of the run on the following pull where they applied these things. I also made sure to let them know that this was exactly what I wanted them to do. Remember, friendly advice is good, but compliments are also great. The rest of the duty went just fine, although it wasn't super fast. I was a bit more focused on the healer in this run, so I only realized near the end of the duty that it seemed the red mage was playing ultra slow mage, which is a red mage who prefers to use the Thunder of Aero over using Jolt at all. Doing this rotation is a significant DPS loss, but I mean, not this bad. No, the real problem is that because of the length of the casts, they often simply did not have time to finish their casts at all. Let's just say it was amazing that Shio, the healer, could compensate for the lost damage at some points, otherwise this run would have been much slower. For Duty 6, we went to the Aetherochemical Research Facility, ARF. Once again, we face issues with the second boss and its exactly 2 marker, so I explained it to the group. I've mentioned it previously, but just to reiterate, the 2 orbs mean exactly 2 players. If 1, 3 or 4 players are in the circle, everyone takes a monstrous amount of damage. If exactly 2 players are in it, including the targeted player themselves, then not much happens. For the final boss, I noticed the Sprout Bard had a lot of trouble with getting up after death because they immediately acted once alive, so I explained the raise involved mechanic to them for future use. It was quite a long run overall, but we did not wipe, so that's pretty good. For Duty 7, we have Guildhest pulling poison Posies, which I haven't seen in a long time. I don't think I've ever seen it in Mentor Roulette. But shocking no one, it's just another mash buttons and win. Maybe move the boss a bit? I just spammed my AoE attack for the most part, both to hold mobs on me, but also just to get rid of things as they came. For Duty 8, we head to Porta Decumana. Looking at how many times the healer got hit by something that had a body cue on the boss instead of a telegraph, I think it is apt to remind everyone to also look at the boss in a fight. Aside from this, the duty went just fine, with the LB3 being used by the Reaper at the end. For Duty 9, we had one of the spoilery ones, if you have not completed the leveling story of Endwalker, so if you don't want to see this, jump to this timestamp shown on screen. With that said, we landed in the Aitiascope. A common problem with the dungeon, especially at the start, is that the pulls are super awkward, which I imagine is what confused the dancers so much they ended up in this situation with technical finish just ticking out, running to the boss. The second boss has this mechanic where he winds up for a charge while these bars on the crystals reduce at different speeds. This can make it a bit unclear which ones will disappear in time and which ones won't, and at the end here, turned out the healer chose wrong. On the bright side, the fight was almost over. This did, however, lead to a situation where the healer used sprint to get back to us. A somewhat common question I get asked in regards to sprint usage is, what if the healer won't or can't sprint? What then? Do I then just not sprint, or what? And this is my answer. I observed that the healer used sprint to get back to us, and concluded that I need to be aware that the healer might lag behind when I sprint, because I'm going to sprint. I should plan around this possibility. As I know the healer isn't sprinting, I also felt more inclined to be a bit more wasteful with my sprint to give the healer more chances to keep up. You can also see here that nothing bad happened as a result of me sprinting ahead. Finally, I also just want to mention that I was mildly disappointed that Pompadour didn't have a Pompadour. For the rest of the duty, things went just fine. Finally, for duty 10, we went to Vanaspati with a really solid white mage healer this time, which gave me space to look more at the DPS. For the Dragoon, the one thing that stood out to me was them using Battle Litany before the fight started on the first boss. Now, for the Black Mage on the other hand, I don't know, maybe they forgot Transpose exists? Or maybe just didn't care? It seemed that after every fight they'd just fizzle out in Astral Fire state and deal with the slow MP recovery and then start over when a new fight began. This also led to a somewhat slow run. Overall, the run was fine, of course, which gave very little grounds to bring up the problems. It also feels insanely nitpicky to complain about the Black Mage doing the part of their rotation between fights wrong. And I simply didn't focus enough on them in the duty to see if it was that bad in fights. I have to say, this session there was a weirdly large amount of white mages that focused on holy stun duration. Aside from that, however, I would say the session went really well. Although not much particularly problematic happened, but sometimes that's how Mentor Roulette is. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Shadowbringers, all jobs had an additional resource bar in addition to MP called the TP bar. TP was used for most physical weapon skills, and before Stormblood, using Sprint ate your entire TP bar. So perhaps you might feel less inclined to use it for pulling, as it would mean you would have nothing left for actually attacking once the mobs were rounded up.